Hello, my name's Ed Fuqua, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Miss Gabby from the Children's Department.
You're here for another episode of Book Talking. This is Book Talking without books.
Like usual.
Yeah, like usual. We're doing another episode of our ongoing conspiracy theory study.
Yes.
I have some great ones for you today.
Okay, I'm excited.
Yes, I chose them all today, so they're bound to be exciting. Some of them are topics we may have mentioned before in previous ones, but I want to go into them in more depth.
Okay.
The first one was the theory that America never landed on the moon.
Oh, I've heard this one a lot, and I believed it for a tiny little bit of time. But
What kind of things have you heard?
The fact that they recreated it in a studio.
Yeah.
Or that they lost the clips and they had to recreate it.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they actually went, but then had to recreate it anyway.
Yeah.
Kind of having your cake and eating it too. I first encountered this when I was a kid in school, and we're having the segment on space in our science class, and parents wrote into the principal demanding that their children be pulled from the class because if we never landed on the moon, it would just be lying to them. So their two kids got to sit in the library while the rest of us learned about how science works.
Oh my God, parents actually
Yes,
did that?
parents complained to the school, the principal pulled them from class. This is a long time ago.
Wow.
This is back in the dark ages in the 1970s.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's how deeply the parents believed it. The kids didn't care, they just got to get out of school for a while. They couldn't be tested on that, of course. So many people believe very passionately that America never landed on the moon, although by now it's become faintly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Back shortly after it happened, you could almost believe it because it was such a unique and unusual thing. But then we went back to the moon several times. We went back to the moon several more times, and since then we've had Skylab, we've had space stations, we have an International Space Station that's up right now. People continue to go into space all the time. So it seems kind of obvious that if we can do that, we can also go to the moon. That's not that far away.
I know.
The theory that we didn't go there claims that it was all completely faked in Hollywood by director Stanley Kubrick.
Really?
Yes. And the reason behind this is, ever seen the movie 2001?
Yeah.
Okay, 2001 has a sequence set on the moon that looks extremely realistic.
Yeah.
That's probably because Stanley Kubrick was really obsessive when it came to getting things accurate on screen. He drove his actors nuts, forcing them to do the same take like 500 times in one instance. Yeah, he was a little obsessive, a genius, but yeah, he had issues. So that's why it looks so realistic. Not that he was doing it for the government, but because that's just how Stanley Kubrick directs. I guarantee if Stanley Kubrick had actually directed the moon landing, Neil Armstrong would have been driven up the wall and probably punched him in the face. I don't think
there would have been no video.
Yeah, I don't think Neil Armstrong would have put up with Stanley Kubrick for very long. I really don't.
No.
Buzz Aldrin in real life did punch somebody in the nose. Yeah, he was like on the sidewalk and someone rushes in front of him and yells at him for like lying to the American public and so forth, and Buzz Aldrin just decked him and kept on walking.
That's funny. I like that.
Yeah. So people believe it very passionately, and for this one, I'm not really sure why.
I don't, just like the theory that you're kind of going against I guess the government.
Yeah.
Maybe that. But
Well, at the time, the theory was that we wanted to beat Russia so badly. The space race became a huge part of the Cold War. Defeating Russia, getting to the moon first, was such importance to our national character.
Yeah.
Particularly in the days as the Vietnam War was winding down, America's needed something to be proud of. And going to the moon, an accomplishment that was just mind-bogglingly incredible, was something that we could do. However, the theory is we didn't actually have the technology to do it, and therefore had to totally fake it to fool the Russians.
Wow.
Now, during the Cold War, this was a theory that not exactly made sense, but I understand people believing it. But the Cold War was long over.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for anyone to ever believe that we didn't really go to the moon now. No one cares about Russia's opinion anymore. If we wanted to go to the moon by now, we could easily have done it.
Definitely. When was the moon landing? What year was the moon landing?
1969?
Oh. Yeah, no, they definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it was an amazing accomplishment, and it could easily have gone wrong in several different ways. The original landing site that they chose actually turned out to be too rocky to land on.
Yeah.
And they had to take charge and pilot it down by hand to make a safe landing.
Wow.
Which they did not plan on. It was all supposed to be pre-programmed by the computer. But in the end, it took an actual astronaut to land on the moon.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they didn't have a lot of like extra fuel to maneuver with, so that was also an issue because they didn't plan on doing that. But yeah, it's something that it's hard to imagine anyone still believes in it, but clearly they do. And part of it is tied up with the flat Earth theory we talked about in our last conspiracy episode. If you believe that the Earth is flat, so you can't really orbit the Earth, then obviously everything that takes place in space has to be totally faked.
Yeah.
Why anyone would go to that much effort to fake something like this, you know?
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People who disbelieve this theory spend like hours and hours poring over every photograph NASA released, trying to find some evidence, like hidden wires holding things up and stuff like that. Well, no, for a long time, people were upset about the fact that the American flag we planted on the moon is like sticking up, as if it's being moved by a breeze. Yeah, it's like, no, it has a wire in it so you can see it's an American flag and not a limp piece of cloth.
I know, because there was like a thing where like the flag was like waving.
Yeah, it's not. It's
no.
just the camera angles and the bad lighting that they had on the moon.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
It's a little crazy.
I know. Okay, what's the next one?
All right. The next one is a bigger conspiracy. This one goes all the way back to the dawn of time. All right, let me give you a riddle. What does the British royal family, the Queen, and you know all the princes and everything, George W. Bush and Bill and Hillary Clinton all have in common?
What?
The answer is they're not human. They're really reptilians.
Oh, I've heard this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a great one.
I heard Justin Bieber was one too.
Hmm?
Justin Bieber, he was one of them
Yeah,
too.
Justin Bieber. Mm-hmm. I'm very suspicious of him.
I know.
Yeah, not human completely, that guy. I've heard some of his music. The idea that you could ever reach the top of the charts without mind control. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
The reptilian theory. I love any theory that links like George W. Bush and the Clintons together, because they're all in it together, you know.
I know.
Now the thing is, originally the theory was that they had human masks that they wore, and they changed the theory recently. I've noticed, they did more recent research for this, that they now shapeshift into human shape. And to do that, they have to drink the blood of children. Yeah, they drink the blood of children, and that gives them the power to shift into human shape. Now, temporarily, at least, they still have to murder children. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Well, if you remember the QAnon theory, which you discussed also in our last episode, that put forth the theory that everybody in the White House for the last umpteen years, and all the people in positions of power around the world, are really a coven of Satanists who torture and sacrifice children.
Yeah.
So this is the exact same theory, except substitute Satanists for reptiles.
I don't get it.
I don't know.
Like there's been like theories that they're like their eyes were glowing, or
Yeah, you can supposedly, if you watch them closely enough, catch their eyes glowing or a forked tongue slip out of their mouth every now and then.
It's crazy.
Bearing in mind, some of these people have like hundreds of hours of footage of them. Yeah, it's just not there.
No.
The theory was invented by a guy named David Icke. He's a former soccer player, or football as they call it in England, who was forced to retire because he had early arthritis. He became a commentator for the BBC and left that, became a candidate for the Green Party, then left that, and then left reality altogether.
Wow.
He appeared on talk shows announcing that he was a messiah who was coming to save the world, but he wouldn't say from what at first. And then he put out his book, The Biggest Secret, revealing that a secret bloodline of people who are all related to each other have controlled the destiny of England, America, in fact, every major superpower for centuries, like going way back to the dawn of time. There's only been one family tree, and it's actually not a human family tree, they're reptiles.
Wow.
Yep.
He must have been on some good drugs then.
He claims to have seen proof. Many people think he was just kicked in the head way too many times in his soccer career.
Yeah.
Anyone who runs around claiming that they're the Messiah, probably you should take what he says with a grain of salt, but millions of people don't.
No.
Now, when I started to research this, I couldn't find any of his YouTube videos. I discovered that they are all gone. They have been taken down from YouTube. His Twitter account he's been perma-banned from Twitter.
Wow.
Yeah. And so his followers all say, well, that's proof. He's trying to reveal the way the world really works, and they want to shut him down. Well, actually, they do want to shut him down, but it has nothing to do with the reptiles.
Nonsense.
Well, it's nothing to do with reptiles, it turns out. Remember how I've said previously, when you believe in one conspiracy theory, you
Yeah.
automatically start building in other ones?
Mhm.
So he started the reptile one like decades ago. He's gone way beyond that now. Reptiles are old hat to him. Now he's moving into other conspiracies. He was pushing things about coronavirus.
Oh,
Yeah.
dangerous subject right there.
A very dangerous subject. He was spreading a lot of misinformation that was costing people their lives. His what really causes coronavirus YouTube video was seen by 30 million people. And since YouTube has a doctrine against dangerous videos that can get people killed, they got taken off of YouTube.
Is there like a copy of the video anywhere?
I'm sure it's around somewhere. If you find his website, I'm sure he has a copy of it. His many followers with 30 million views, I guarantee someone downloaded it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's out there. But he's not on YouTube anymore. Now, evidence for the reptile conspiracy. Well, let's see. First of all, one of the biggest things is he makes the claim that everyone has a fear of snakes. Are you afraid of snakes?
Actually, yes, I am.
Okay. Millions of people are afraid of snakes. And he says this is a subconscious memory that the human race used to be ruled by reptiles in ancient times. And that's our dim, Stone Age memory of those days that makes us automatically afraid of snakes.
Wow.
This is kind of BS.
Yeah.
Many people are afraid of a lot of things that really don't mean anything, any kind of deep-seated Stone Age memory coming back to the surface. My wife is afraid of spiders. That doesn't mean there's an ancient race of spiders that ruled us in Stone Age time.
Yeah.
No one has that theory. Although now that I've started it,
A giant tarantula.
yeah, someone probably will have that theory now that I've started. I shouldn't have opened my mouth. But the fact is, first of all, not everyone is afraid of snakes. Many
No.
people like snakes.
Yeah, definitely.
The people that keep snakes as pets. I had a friend who had an albino python. Gorgeous animals,
They
absolutely
are.
beautiful. Yeah.
There was this video I saw on the internet the other day, and this made me forget about my whole fear. Someone put their snake in a little hat. They knit their snake's hats. It's the cutest video ever. But that
Yeah.
when you appreciate it, when
Yeah.
you see it, it's cute. But there's moments when you see vicious,
Yeah, people aren't automatically afraid of reptiles or snakes. I had a friend who had a pet iguana.
Yeah.
And I had nothing against the iguana. He was actually my roommate briefly. But watching it crawl around the living room, I remember thinking to myself, I've had a cat and a dog in my life, mostly cats. And when I look at my cat, I know what he's thinking most of the time.
Yeah.
Mostly it's food or I want to sleep now. But I can tell by the cat's body language and expression on his face what a cat is thinking, because they're a mammal like us. Whereas reptiles aren't mammals. They don't have facial expressions.
Yeah, they just look the same way.
Yeah, looking at the eyes of that iguana, they were like black glass.
Yeah.
I couldn't see a thing that was going on behind his eyes. Well, it didn't really scare me. I understood why someone would be scared. And snakes are exactly the same way. He swore he could tell what mood he was in by the way his iguana was moving, the way he flicked his tail, the way he held his head. And if you're around them enough, you probably can.
You get to know all their body patterns.
Yeah, you can walk up to a cage and say, oh yeah, that snake's riled up today. Whereas an ordinary person who has no experience probably wouldn't be able to tell that.
Yeah.
Plus, people have only really hated snakes since Christian times. The Bible very explicitly says that snakes are evil. They associate them with Satan. It's right there in Genesis. It's right there in black and white. Prior to that, people weren't particularly afraid of snakes. In ancient Greece and Rome, there was no hatred or fear of snakes. A bite from a snake can kill you, so you must treat them with respect. Snakes were associated with prophecy in ancient Greece.
Yeah.
The oracle at Delphi was referred to as the Pythoness, which is the same root word that we get python from. And in India in particular, they had the Naga, who were part human and part snake. And they weren't considered monsters, they were revered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Many prominent families in India can supposedly trace their heritage back to, Naga ancestry. So the idea that we automatically don't like snakes or reptiles of any sort is just absolutely flatly not true.
Yeah.
So that leaves no evidence whatsoever. The other one I want to talk about is another huge one, and that's the ancient astronaut theory.
I never heard this one.
All right. This one was really, really super big. They invented it in the 1970s when I was a kid, and I read all the books, and they didn't make much sense to me. I could see through them pretty quickly, but the idea fascinated me because I love aliens.
Yeah.
And I love history, and I love archaeology. So this combines history and aliens and archaeology all in one thing. A guy named Eric von Däniken wrote a book called Chariots of the Gods, in which he took a bunch of like Mayan and Aztec carvings out of context from their original place that they were left by the indigenous people, and tried to reinterpret them as showing modern things, indicating that aliens from outer space, ancient astronauts, arrived on Earth, and that they're responsible for creating the cultures of ancient times. And that is supposedly the explanation for why ancient people were able to build such amazing things.
Yeah.
You know, how did they build Stonehenge? How did they build the pyramids?
Yeah.
So supposedly explains all the mysteries archaeologists can't explain. History Channel, which used to actually show documentaries based on history, started showing things mostly based on completely made up stuff. They began a series called Ancient Aliens, which is a really ludicrous, over-the-top series.
Yeah.
It's one of like 2 different TV series that are on exploring all of these theories. There's a commentator on that show, I have to mispronounce his name here, Giorgio Tsoulakis.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a former news commentator who now hosts these ancient alien shows. And his favorite catchphrase is, it must be aliens. Anything he doesn't understand, it must be aliens. Anything that's beyond him, he can't figure out how someone did something, aliens. That is his catch-all explanation for it has to be aliens.
That's not good.
Yeah, if he doesn't know what it means or where it comes from, then obviously it's aliens. I've watched a few of them, and they were so hysterically funny, but I couldn't keep watching them knowing that some people believe this.
Yeah.
He was talking about ancient Babylon, and the gods of Babylon, who supposedly created the human race to do stuff for them, to mine gold and things like that. And they had these aliens known as the Anunnaki who came down to Earth and created, like, mankind. And at one point he exclaims, these people couldn't make this stuff up. This had to be real. I'm like, what? People don't make stuff up? Like, people in ancient times couldn't make things up?
I know. Like, they didn't have the ability to figure out.
Yeah, no, there's like a lot of precedent for people in ancient times just making stuff up. Like every ancient mythology that people no longer believe in. The conspiracy part of this is that every museum is supposedly filled with ancient artifacts recovered from all these sites all over the globe that scientists are keeping locked up and hidden so no one will know the truth.
Wow.
And the truth is, there's zero evidence for this.
Okay.
There's never been anything found.
Yeah.
People in ancient times did all kinds of things that we don't really understand today. Not that it's a scientific principle we don't understand, it's that we don't know why they did it or how they did it. There was a guy in ancient Greece who invented a primitive steam engine.
Yeah.
He could heat up water and use it to do stuff. He never did anything with it. The idea of making a steam locomotive apparently never occurred to him. Also, in ancient times, when they were mining quarries, they would dig like grooves, and instead of having a wheeled cart, it would slide through a groove that they would grease, just like a modern-day train.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like one step away from coming up with something that was very modern, but they never made that last step, so far as we know. Even things like the Archimedes screw that brings up water for irrigation purposes is a brilliant invention. It's thousands of years old. But it didn't take aliens to tell someone how to do it. It just took someone who knew like how water worked. Yeah. The belief that people can only accomplish things with the help of aliens pretty much denies the fact that human beings are really brilliant. There's a reason why we're at the top of the food chain now. We can do all those things that dinosaurs couldn't, so far as we know. Yeah, human inventiveness is just incredible. And you look at something today and we don't know how it was done. It doesn't mean that humans had to have help. It just means that there was a technology, or more importantly, a skill that was lost over the years.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people have come up with things that they try to recreate in modern times, how people did things in the old days.
But also at the same time, we all, what's the word when evolve?
Yeah.
We all evolve throughout throughout the times to, I guess, adapt to like the setting that we're in.
Exactly.
So we don't have the same skills as they did like back.
Well, the word evolved isn't quite right, because people in like ancient Egypt
Mhm.
were as evolved as we are.
Okay.
But what they had was a different way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
The scientific principle of having a theory and testing that theory and proving your theory, that hadn't been invented yet.
And also at the same time though, they still had, I don't know, they had to do things that I guess we didn't. So I guess they thought differently than we did.
They looked at the world in a very different
Yeah.
way, which is why some of the things they did are incomprehensible to
Yeah.
us. But they had ways of doing things that are hard to recreate today. Like if you had to build a pyramid today, it would take several years and thousands of people, and a quarry that you could mine for a huge amount of stone. So that would be an enormous project. It could be done, but it would be really difficult. When they used to make medieval cathedrals, that would take like 10, 20 years sometimes to make a cathedral in medieval times.
Yeah.
And we know that was done because they left behind plenty of records of how they did it.
Mhm.
There's tons of sketches and blueprints and half-finished cathedrals all over the place. So we know exactly how they did that. Building a pyramid was a lot of ways easier than building a cathedral.
Yeah.
Building a cathedral so the roof doesn't collapse is hard. Building a pyramid that doesn't collapse just takes a lot of rock and a lot of like sweat and manpower.
Mhm.
Over the years, they've discovered things that scientists didn't have back in the day. Like for instance, an archaeological dig discovered a settlement very near the Great Pyramid of Khufu.
Mhm.
And they think these were the workers who worked on the pyramid. The assumption is that rather than having slave labor build the pyramids, it was probably farmers who were out of work.
Yeah.
Because Egypt is a desert, and you can only farm during the rainy season, or rather when the Nile floods. Because all the crops are grown when the Nile was flooding, and it wasn't flood season, there's nothing for farmers to do. So the government conscripted them into a massive like public works project,
Mhm.
a pyramid, a tribute to our great ruler, whom they also considered to be a god. So when a god commands you to do something, you do it.
Yeah.
The best method I've seen, and several different scientists have come up with different methods the way it could have been done, was that you basically build a huge mound of dirt around your structure.
Mhm.
You lay down stones, and then you bring in more dirt and pile it up. And then you stand on the dirt to lay the next line of stones down. And you keep doing that until you have a ginormous pyramid and a really big mound of dirt next to it.
Yeah.
Then you just shovel the dirt away, which is a task that will take months, if not years, all by itself.
Mhm.
But when you're done, the pyramid is just sitting there in the middle of nowhere, seemingly, on the plains of Giza, with no clue as to how it was done.
Yeah. It's just there.
Because you shoveled away all the dirt,
Yeah.
and they packed up their tools and went home.
Mhm.
The ancient stone carving techniques that they had. There are places in South America where they've made buildings with these massive stone blocks that fit together so tightly you can't even slide a sheet of paper between them.
Wow.
They're almost like airtight. Does that mean aliens were involved?
No.
It means these people were super good at what they did. This is before the internet,
Yeah.
before television. They had nothing else to do with their time but hone their stone carving skills for generation after generation of stone carvers until they got really super good at it.
Yeah.
They were geniuses, and to deny the genius of ancient people by saying aliens had to do it.
That's like insulting.
It's extremely insulting. It insults the entire human race.
Yeah.
When it comes to more modern projects, they've had people work on things like people are pondering like how come there are people from the same Polynesian ethnic groups scattered all across the South Pacific, even though these islands are thousands and thousands of miles apart.
Mhm.
The assumption is they all sailed there at one point, or were deposited there by aliens. And so a guy named Thor Heyerdahl, like years ago back in the 60s,
Yeah.
he built a really big ocean-going canoe, exactly like the Polynesians used to do, and managed to sail across the Pacific, one island to another, with no modern instruments.
Wow.
To prove, yes, you can do it.
Yeah.
They managed to completely recreate a Greek trireme, which is the ship was the major super weapon of the Greek era.
Mhm.
They had a wooden ship that was so big it had 3 rows of oars with hundreds of people on the oars moving at the same time.
That's cool.
And there was accounts of it,
Mhm.
so people believed that it existed, but no one really knew how they had done it. And a university in Greece managed to actually recreate a life-size trireme, which they crewed with volunteers from the college.
Wow.
All the fraternities got together, and they actually rode that sucker out onto the ocean, and it worked.
That's cool.
It worked just great.
That's really
People
cool.
in Scandinavia have rebuilt Viking longships that are fully capable of sailing to North America if they felt like it. They're absolutely seaworthy, fantastic vessels. We can accept that these things can be done.
Yeah.
These are much smaller scale projects, and the bigger scale projects are exactly the same. The one thing that all these three theories have in common is that there's zero evidence for all of them. There's absolutely no evidence for any of these things, even though many people passionately and devotedly believe in them, despite having no evidence. And it's sad that people live that way.
I know.
You just can't accept things at face value in today's world. You never should have done it. But these days, with everything that's out there, it's just ridiculous.
It's hard to, like, you know, come out of a hole like that.
It's, yeah, once you fall down the rabbit hole, they call it. Once you're in the rabbit hole, it's hard to get out. But we need reason and rationality now more than ever.
Definitely.
People are dying every day because they have a view of the world that's not accurate. They believe things that just aren't true, and that leads them to make bad choices.
Yeah.
Some of the things that people are believing today are, you know, no more realistic than reptiles secretly rule the earth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
These videos make me believe less and less in the human race.
I don't know. People are capable of amazing things, both
Yeah.
good and bad. That's the thing you have to be aware of.
I know.
We definitely live in an age you can't take anything at face value.
Definitely.
You have to think about it. When we analyze conspiracies, like, does it make logical sense? You know, and most of these things don't make logical sense.
Yeah.
Um,
But they're cool to think about, I guess.
it's cool to think about.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Jack Kirby, when he was at Marvel Comics, loved the Ancient Aliens theory. He used it in 2 or 3 of his books. His comic book series, The Eternals, which is now being made into a major motion picture, is based on the idea that aliens came to Earth and adapted the genetic code of certain humans back in the Stone Age, creating a race of superpowered individuals who secretly behind the scenes are working to advance the human race.
Wow.
And they'll apparently be a part of the new MCU coming in a few years probably at this rate. And also the idea of reptilians in the Marvel Universe comic books. They've adopted the idea that there was a race of ancient reptiles who ruled the earth because Robert E. Howard used that theory in Conan. And if it was in Conan, it must be true. So writers at Marvel Comics incorporated that into the Marvel Universe in the comic books.
Yeah.
The Avengers have fought against the evil Serpent Crown several times, in which the dark forces want to take over the earth and so forth.
That was cool.
It sounds cool in a comic book,
Yeah.
but if you try to believe it in real life, you're going to run into a lot of issues.
I like these. These are fun.
Okay, these are fun conspiracy
Yeah.
theories.
Next week?
We'll see what happens next week.
Okay.
All right, leaving it wide open right now.
Mystery.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so until next time, I have been Ed.
And I'm Miss Gabby.
See you next time. Until then, be safe.